Now to a Situation Room special report. Curtis Yarvin is a blogger who's been a fixture of right-wing circles around Silicon Valley. The computer engineer turned political theorist wants to see American democracy replaced by a monarchy led by a CEO. And now, Yarvin has the ear of some of Washington's most powerful people. CNN's Hadass Gold has more.
Hi, Hadass. Nice to meet you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Meet the man inspiring the next generation of MAGA, Curtis Yarvin, who thinks America should no longer be a democracy. Even before Trump's re-election, he envisioned a fantasy world where Trump was president again, and with chilling accuracy described how he would take aim at public and private institutions without any interference from Congress or the courts.
Obviously, I'm not the secret mastermind of the Trump-Vance administration.
You're not? I thought there was a hotline.
The software engineer and blogger has been called the father of dark Enlightenment political theory. That means he thinks democracy is overrated, and what the U.S. needs is a king.
A monarch, a single focus of authority is, absolutely necessary to run any integrated system efficiently. You could probably put any of the Fortune 500 CEOs in and say, okay, you're in charge of the executive branch, fix this. They'd probably do fine. They wouldn't be Hitler or Stalin.
And he's got some powerful people listening.
I think you're pretty far out in a way that is worth thinking about.
There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written about some of these things.
Years before Elon Musk and Doge, Yarvin coined the phrase RAGE, retire all government employees. Next, he sees a world where the power is not with the people.
Should there be, though, elections in your world of a sovereign CEO?
There needs to be a way of basically holding the sovereign CEO accountable.
But not every single person should have a vote.
I have 4 beautiful children. None of them have a vote.
Experts in democracy like Harvard professor Daniel Allen, who publicly debated Yarvin, say his ideas are dangerous.
It is not the case that autocracies over the course of history have delivered good for human beings. They have consistently violated freedom.
Not surprisingly, Yarvin is no stranger to controversy. He's been accused of using racist tropes and whitewashing history.
Certain races are better at certain things than others.
Do you not necessarily believe, then, that certain races would be better at governing a country than others?
Governing a country is just a skill. And, it's like the British in India would basically say, oh, this race is a governing race, this race is not a governing race, based on culture, based on tradition, based on biology.
So you're saying, yes, certain races would be better at running governments than others?
Would be better at doing anything, but those are only averages.
As for Trump, Yarvin says the administration is still not going far enough in harnessing executive power.
You laid out how you thought things could be done in a way that were fast, that may be a little bit dirty, and some of the things they do seem to be doing there in the White House. Are you not pleased with how they're doing it?
No, because I think that if you basically take anything complicated and you try to do 10% of it, you're not going to 5% or maybe 1%, you're probably not going to result in anything good.
Instead, Yarvin is looking to younger generations.
I think most of my influence on sort of the Trump administration is less through the leadership and more through like kids in the administration who read my kind of stuff because my audience is very young. And
are you in touch with staffers at the White House on a regular basis?
I don't really know what a regular basis is, but
are you emailing on the phone with them?
Are there people in the administration who are on signal groups with me? Yes, there are. I'm just out there in the marketplace of ideas, and I think the marketplace of ideas has definitely expanded in the last 10 years.
CNN media correspondent Hadass Gold is with us now for more on her reporting. Hi, Hadass, great to see you. So Yarvin has been writing about this for more than a decade. Why are scholars in democracy so concerned about people like Yarvin gaining popularity right now in this moment?
Yeah, Yarvin has been writing for a long time. He's been around the sort of the Silicon Valley right wing, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen for a very long time. But it's really been in the last 5 years that he's taken off. And it's young people, especially, as he noted. I spoke to some students at Harvard who really cited COVID and COVID-era policies that cause them to be disillusioned with how things are currently run. And that's why scholars are rather alarmed. Daniel Allen, that Harvard professor who debated him, said one of the reasons she even wanted to address him, that she even would debate him, is because of his rising popularity. And they're worried for several reasons. For one, they say autocracies consistently violate freedoms. There's also economical issues when you talk about putting some sort of CEO-like dictator in charge. They say that they lead to declining economies, to capital flight. I spoke to one professor at UCLA, Daniel Treisman, who said that democracy increases GDP per capita by 20%. And one thing that they said that Curtis Yarvin often talks about, he says, you know, you could put any of these CEOs in power and they wouldn't be a Hitler and Stalin. He tried to argue to me that just the way that our society currently is would not lend itself to create a Hitler or a Stalin and the atrocities that they caused. But these scholars, they say, listen, a lot of these autocrats, a lot of these dictators, when they come in, they might be well-intentioned, but as they try to hold on to power, that's when they become more and more repressive, and that is part of the issue. Other than, of course, you know, if you like to be able to vote for your representatives in Congress, if you like to vote for your leaders, what he's arguing for is essentially saying we shouldn't necessarily have those types of elections. Guys.
Hadas Gold, excellent reporting. Thank you very, very much for that report. Right now, I want to bring in our senior legal analyst, Ellie Honig. Ellie, I want to highlight at least part of what we just heard from Hadas. Yarvin was asked how to make sure a leader doesn't become the next Hitler or Stalin. His response, and I'm quoting him now, you need to concentrate that power in a single individual and then just hope somehow that this is the right individual or close to the right individual. Ellie, what do you think about that?
Well, this is a far extreme view, obviously, Wolf, and it's not fully fleshed out. When the answer is, well, let's just hope for the best, that's not particularly convincing. Now, that said, it's important that we pay attention to this individual's views because, as Hadas's reporting shows, there are high-ranking people in the administration, up to the vice president, who have in the past cited his principles and apparently are using them as some sort of guiding force. Hadas elicited from this person that he apparently is in contact with some government officials. We can see some echoes of what he's advocating in the actions of the Trump administration. They are pushing the outer boundaries within the courts, within the context of our legal system, of their executive power, and at times even going beyond that in the efforts to try to control universities and law firms and media organizations. So this is a core fundamental battle that will play out in the courts and in our political theater.
All right, and on that note, on this topic of the courts and consolidating power in the executive branch, I want to ask you about my conversation with White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller on Friday. Listen to this exchange from that interview, and then I'll have you weigh in on the other side.
Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, it's a very important point. Congress stripped the district courts of jurisdiction in matters of immigration. So each and every time a district court, in other words, they created Article 2 immigration courts in the executive branch and stripped Article 3 courts of jurisdiction. So every time a district court is setting national immigration policy, that district court judge is violating the law.
That's not true. It's not true, right?
This is a falsity that Stephen Miller has apparently been trying to make real by sheer volume and repetition. He has been going around to various media outlets and claiming that under the Constitution, our courts have no power to review the executive branch's actions on immigration writ large. That is false. No court has ever held that in the history of this country. We know it's false because courts have and continue to, in fact, rule on immigration questions. And what he does here, Pam, is a bit of sleight of hand. As you pointed out later in the interview, there are certain narrow circumstances where Congress has actually said, okay, this narrow issue of immigration law is not to be reviewed by the courts. Trump won a Supreme Court ruling on one of those narrow issues just last week. But that does not mean, as Stephen Miller claims it does, that the courts have zero power when it comes to immigration. In fact, the courts do have the power to and need to exercise that power to review most of the executive's actions on immigration.
Yeah, because it sounds like what he was trying to argue there is that Congress created this law that took away all authority from the judiciary under Article 3 to provide a check on the executive branch under Article 2 when it comes to immigration, and that any check would come from within the immigration judges under the executive branch, which seems to fly in the face of the way that our system of government and the Constitution is set up.
Yeah, it flies in the face of Constitution, laws, and practice. If it was the case that Stephen Miller was correct, that the courts had no authority over immigration, we would know that because the courts would not be ruling on immigration.
Right.
But
The
again,
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court. I mean, no justice of any ideology has ever held that. You can look at the liberal justices, you can look at justices, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, you can look at Thomas, you can look at Alito. None of them have ever said what Stephen Miller is saying.
Elie Honig, as always, thank you very, very much. And it jumped out at me, Pamela, you went to law school. He never went to law school, Stephen Miller. and that was clear in the course of that interview.
Yeah, I got a Master in Studies of Law. Thank you for pointing that out, Wolf. But Elie Honig is a lawyer.
He
was a prosecutor in the federal government, so I wanted to make sure he was on to weigh in on this.
He knows his stuff.
It was very validating.